My mistake was born from love, but it almost cost me my son. When he accused me of ruining his life, I knew I had to tear down my own world just to set him free. Don't forget to subscribe, my dear, so you don't miss any stories in the future. And I'm very interested to know where you watch me from. Please write in the comments. Now, let's begin our story.
My son, my beautiful boy, Jordan, told me last week that he was ashamed of me. He stood in the middle of my perfectly kept living room, a place where every object was chosen for his comfort, his enjoyment, and said the words with a quiet, dead calm that was far more devastating than any shouting could have been. "I'm ashamed you're my mother," he said. "And you didn't just protect me, you ruined my life." For a week now, I haven't been able to eat, haven't been able to sleep. I just replay those words, searching for a way they could be untrue, a way for this to be a misunderstanding. But I can't. Because the most terrible part, the part that's lodged like a shard of glass in my heart, is that he might be right. You're probably thinking he's just an ungrateful child, another millennial blaming his parents for his own failures. I thought so too, for about 5 minutes. I wanted to scream, to list the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the endless work I put in to give him a safe, perfect world. But if you knew the specific decision I made on his 18th birthday, a decision I was so proud of, a decision I thought was the ultimate act of a loving, protective mother, but which instead became the walls of the gilded cage he could never escape, you might just see his point. This is the story of how I learned that the road to hell isn't just paved with good intentions, it's paved with a mother's love, my love. From the moment Jordan was born, he was my entire world. His father had passed in a car accident when Jordan was just a toddler, leaving me alone to navigate the world with this precious, vulnerable little boy. And the world, as I saw it, was a terrifying place, full of risks, of dangers, of things that could hurt my son. So I made it my life's mission to be his shield. I vetted his friends, I monitored his schoolwork, I curated his experiences to ensure he was never exposed to failure, to disappointment, to pain. I worked 2 jobs, as a hospital administrator by day and a medical transcriptionist by night, not for luxuries, but to build a fortress of security around him. He was a brilliant boy, smart, artistic, with a passion for photography. He had a portfolio that could take your breath away, full of stark, beautiful images of our city. His dream was to go to NYU, to study at the Tisch School of the Arts, to be a real artist in New York City. He was accepted, a full scholarship. It was the proudest moment of my life. And it was the moment I made my fatal mistake. New York City. To me, it wasn't a place of dreams. It was a den of inequity, a dangerous, expensive, unforgiving city so far away from me, from the safety I had so carefully constructed. The thought of my sensitive, artistic boy alone in that concrete jungle terrified me. What if he failed? What if he got hurt? What if he was lonely? So I made it my ultimate act of love. On his 18th birthday, just as he was preparing to accept the NYU offer, I sat him down. I told him I had a surprise. I had used a significant portion of the inheritance his father had left us to buy him a gift, a fully paid-for 4-year scholarship to our local state university, a good school, a safe school, only a 40-minute drive away. And not only that, I had put a down payment on a brand new, fully furnished condo just 10 minutes from my house. "You don't have to struggle in New York, baby," I'd said, my heart swelling with what I thought was generosity. "You can stay here, be safe, get your degree, and I'll take care of everything. You can focus on your art without worrying about a thing." He was confused at first. Then I saw the light in his eyes dim. But He was 18. He was a good boy who loved his mother. How could he refuse such a massive, loving gift? He accepted. He turned down NYU. And I, in my blind, arrogant love, thought I had saved him. I had protected him from the big, bad world. In reality, I had just clipped his wings. The years that followed were fine on the surface. He did well in school. He lived in his nice condo. I made sure it was always stocked with his favorite foods. I helped him with his laundry. I was always there. But something was missing. The passion he had for photography began to wane. He'd take pictures, but they lacked the old fire. He'd get a job at a local advertising agency, a safe, steady job with good benefits, and he was good at it. But he was quiet, resigned.
He dated, but never seriously. How could he bring a woman into a life that was still so completely managed by his mother? I saw it all, but I told myself it was for the best. He was safe. He was comfortable. He was near me. That's what mattered, wasn't it? The confrontation happened last Tuesday. He'd just turned 30. I'd thrown him a small, perfect party. Afterwards, as we were cleaning up, I'd mentioned how happy I was that he'd built such a good, stable life here. That's when he snapped. "A good life, Mom?" he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Or the life you built for me?" He laid it all out then. The lost dream of NYU, the feeling of being trapped in a life that wasn't his, the friends who'd gone on to have adventures, to fail, to succeed, to live, while he was stuck in a safe, beige existence I had designed. "You didn't protect me, Mom," he said, his voice breaking with 12 years of pent-up resentment. "You smothered me. You were so afraid of me getting hurt that you never let me live. Every decision, every choice was filtered through you. I'm 30 years old, and I've never truly stood on my own 2 feet. I tried to defend myself, to talk about my love, my sacrifices. And that's when he said the words that shattered my world. Your sacrifices weren't for me. They were for you, for your own fear. And your love, it feels like a cage, and I'm suffocating. I love you, Mom, but I am so deeply ashamed that you're my mother, because you never trusted me enough to be my own man." He walked out then, leaving me standing in the ruins of my own good intentions, the truth of his words a blinding, unbearable light. I had done everything to protect my son from the world, and in doing so, I had become the one thing he needed protection from. For a week, the silence in my house was a monument to my failure. Jordan didn't call. He didn't text. He had walked out, and this time I knew it wasn't just a fleeting anger. It was a final, damning verdict on my entire life as a mother. His words, "I'm ashamed you're my mother," played on a ceaseless loop in my head. They were the bars of a new cage, one I had built for myself out of my own so-called love. At first, I wallowed in self-pity and righteous indignation. How could he? After all I'd done, all I'd sacrificed. I mentally listed every late night I'd worked, every vacation I'd skipped, every dollar I'd saved, all for him, for his safety, for his future. I had been a good mother, a perfect mother, hadn't I? But the silence of the empty house was a merciless echo chamber, and in that silence, his other words began to fester. "You smothered me. Your love feels like a cage. You never trusted me enough to be my own man." One rainy afternoon, driven by a need to either prove him wrong or punish myself further, I went up to the attic. I pulled out the old boxes filled with his childhood, report cards with perfect grades, participation trophies from sports I'd pushed him into because they were safe. And then I found it. The old dusty portfolio from his senior year of high school. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were the photographs he had planned to submit to NYU. Stark, beautiful, black and white images of our city. They were breathtaking, full of a raw talent, a unique perspective,
a yearning for something bigger than our quiet suburban life. They were the work of an artist, a young man with a fire in his soul, a fire I had so carefully, so lovingly extinguished with a local scholarship and a fully furnished condo. I sat there on the dusty attic floor surrounded by the ghosts of the son he could have been, and I wept. Not for his cruelty to me, but for my cruelty to him. He was right. I hadn't been protecting him from the world. I had been protecting myself from my own fear. Fear of him failing, fear of him getting hurt, but most of all, fear of him leaving. My love hadn't been a shield. It had been an anchor holding him fast in the safe, shallow waters of my own anxiety, while his ship was meant to sail for distant, unknown oceans. The realization was a physical agony, a knife twisting in my gut. I had ruined his life, not with malice, but with love, the most insidious weapon of all. That night, something inside me broke, or maybe something was finally born, a new, terrifying but necessary resolve. I couldn't undo the past. I couldn't give him back his lost dream, his lost years. But I could do one thing. I could tear down the cage I had built. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to a real estate agent. I told her to put the condo I had bought for Jordan on the market immediately, the one he still lived in, the one I paid the taxes and fees on, my golden cage for him. The second call was to my financial advisor. I gave him instructions to set up a new, irrevocable trust. A week later, after the condo had a pending offer, I did the hardest thing I have ever had to do. I drove to Jordan's office, the advertising agency, where he was slowly dying of quiet desperation. I didn't call ahead, I just waited for him in the lobby. When he saw me, his face hardened. He looked wary, defensive. "What do you do here, Mom?" he asked, his voice low, cold. I didn't offer excuses or pleas. I just handed him a large manila envelope. "I'm not here to argue, Jordan," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "I'm just here to give you this. Please, just read it." He hesitated, then took the envelope. Inside were 2 documents. The first was the sales agreement for his condo. The second was a letter from my financial advisor detailing the creation of the Jordan Dubois Independence Trust. I had taken all the proceeds from the sale of the condo, added a significant portion of my own retirement savings, and put it all into that trust, a trust to which he, and only he, had full, unrestricted access. "I can't give you back New York, Jordan," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "I can't give you back the last 12 years. God knows I would if I could. But I can give you this, your freedom. No strings attached. Go back to school. Travel. Quit your job and build a shack on a beach and take pictures of seagulls. Fail. Succeed. Make a mess. Live your life, not the one I was too scared to let you have. It's the only apology I can offer." He just stared at the papers in his hand, his expression a mask of stunned belief. "And one more thing," I said, taking a step back, creating a space between us that felt like a mile and an inch. "I'm selling my house. I'm going away for a while. To figure out who Diane is when she's not just Jordan's mother. You need your space. And I, it turns out, desperately need my own." I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there in that sterile office lobby, holding the keys to his new life. I didn't know if it was too little, too late. I didn't know if he would ever truly forgive me. But as I walked out into the bright, uncertain sunlight, I felt a terrifying, exhilarating lightness. The cage was open, and I was just now realizing that I had been trapped inside it too. I sold my house, the fortress I had so carefully maintained, in less than a month. I packed 2 suitcases, put the rest of my life into storage, and bought a train ticket with no final destination. It was the most terrifying and liberating thing I had ever done.
For the first time since I was 21 years old, I had no one to answer to, no one to care for, no one's life to manage but my own. I was completely and utterly adrift, and it was glorious. I traveled for months. I went to places I'd only ever seen in books. I saw the vast, humbling expanse of the Grand Canyon, the misty, ancient forests of the Pacific Northwest, the vibrant, chaotic energy of New Orleans. I wasn't a tourist. I was a student. I was learning what it felt like to be just Diane. I ate when I was hungry, slept when I was tired, and talked to strangers in diners and bus stations, people who knew nothing of my past, who saw me not as Jordan's mother, but just as a woman with kind eyes and a story to tell, if she chose to. I didn't hear from Jordan for a long time. I had left him a letter with my new anonymous email address telling him he could write when he was ready, but I didn't expect to hear from him soon. I had to give him space to hate me, to miss me, to figure out who he was without my shadow looming over him. The silence was painful, a constant, dull ache, but I knew it was necessary. My love for him had been a cage, and now my absence had to be the key. During my travels, I rediscovered a part of myself I thought was long dead, the artist. In a small coastal town in Oregon, I bought a cheap set of watercolors and a sketch pad, and I started to paint. The stark cliffs, the churning gray ocean, the resilient little wildflowers clinging to the rocks. I painted what I felt, the beauty, the loneliness, the terrifying freedom. It wasn't about being good. It was about being honest. For the first time, I was creating something that wasn't for anyone else, just for me. The beige walls of my old life were being washed away by vibrant, messy, imperfect color. The first email from Jordan arrived 3 months into my journey. It was short and not what I expected. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a photograph, a picture he had taken, a stunning black and white shot of a single, empty subway car in New York City, the light catching the worn textures of the seats, the sense of motion and solitude palpable. There was no text, just the image. My heart leaped. He was in New York. He had taken the money, the freedom I had given him, and he had gone to the place I had denied him. He was chasing his dream. My hands trembled as I typed a reply. It was just one word. Beautiful. A week later, another email arrived. This time there were words. Dear Mom, he wrote, I don't know where to start. For the first month after you left, I hated you. I felt abandoned, terrified. I had all this money and all this freedom, and I had no idea what to do with it. I almost went down some bad roads. But then I realized that was the point. You didn't give me a plan. You just gave me a choice. For the first time in my life. He told me that he had sold the condo, put the money into a simple savings account, and bought a one-way bus ticket to New York, just as he had dreamed of doing at 18. He'd found a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, enrolled in a photography workshop, and was spending his days just walking, taking pictures, living. It's hard, Mom. It's lonely. I failed more times in the last 2 months than in my entire life before, and it's the most alive I have ever felt. Thank you for finally letting me go. I sat in my small motel room in Oregon, the sound of the Pacific Ocean outside my window, and I wept. Not tears of grief, but tears of a painful, profound, and overwhelming joy. My terrible mistake, my suffocating love had almost ruined him, but my final desperate act of letting go, it had saved us both. Our relationship didn't magically heal overnight. It was rebuilt, slowly, tentatively, through emails filled with shared photographs and honest, sometimes difficult words. We were no longer just mother and son, bound by duty and a shared past. We were two separate people, two adults on our own journeys of self-discovery, learning to see and respect each other for who we truly were, not who we thought the other should be. My journey continued. I learned that I was a woman who loved the mountains, who was surprisingly good at pottery, who could strike up a conversation with anyone. I learned that my worth was not tied to how well I cared for someone else. And as I found myself,
I realized that the love for my son had also transformed. It was no longer a fearful, grasping thing. It was a calm, steady light, one that could shine from a distance, trusting that he had his own light to guide him. The cage was gone. For both of us. And what lay ahead was an open, unknown, and beautiful road.
I spent the better part of a year on the road, a silver-haired nomad with a sketchbook and a train pass. I learned that I loved the dry, expansive heat of the Arizona desert, the bustling, chaotic energy of Chicago's blues clubs, and the quiet, misty solitude of the redwood forests in California. I was no longer running from something. I was running to something, though I wasn't sure what it was. I was simply collecting pieces of myself, fragments I hadn't known were missing, left scattered across the country of my own unexplored life. My communication with Jordan continued, evolving from single photographs to long, thoughtful emails. We wrote about our days, our challenges, our small victories. He told me about his struggles and triumphs in New York, the brutal critiques in his photography class, the joy of capturing the perfect shot, the odd jobs he took to make ends meet, the strange pride he felt in paying his own rent for a tiny, overpriced apartment. And I told him about my travels, about the people I met, about the woman I was becoming. I didn't offer advice. I didn't try to solve his problems. I just listened and I shared. And in that shared space, that respectful distance, our relationship began to heal. It was in Santa Fe, a city of adobe and turquoise and piercingly blue skies, that I met Samuel. He wasn't a whirlwind romance like in some storybook. He was a retired geologist, a widower with kind, crinkly eyes and a quiet sense of humor. We met in a pottery class, our hands covered in clay, and bonded over our mutual inability to make a symmetrical bowl. He was a good man, a calm man, and he was interested not in Jordan's mother, but in Diane, the woman who loved art and had strong opinions about politics and laughed loudly at his bad jokes. It was a gentle, mature companionship, a quiet warmth that felt like coming home, even though I was 1,000 miles away from anything I'd ever called home before. The invitation from Jordan came on a crisp autumn morning. It was an Evite, formal and yet deeply personal. It was for his first ever solo photography exhibition at a small, prestigious gallery in Greenwich Village. "I know it's a long way, Mom," his email read, "but it wouldn't feel right if you weren't there. I want you to see what I've been doing with the freedom you gave me." My heart swelled with pride so fierce it almost hurt. I booked the flight that same day. I told Samuel about it, my voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and a deep, gut-wrenching nervousness. What would it be like, seeing my son again after all this time, after everything that had been said and done? "He's inviting you to see his soul, Diane," Samuel said, his hand covering mine. "That's a beautiful thing. Go, be proud." Walking into that New York gallery was one of the most surreal moments of my life. The room was buzzing with people, all looking at my son's work, which was displayed on the clean, white walls. The photographs were magnificent. They were raw, beautiful, full of a vulnerability and a strength I recognized immediately. They were pictures of his journey, the loneliness of the city, the beauty in its decay, the resilience of its people. Then I saw him. Across the room, he was talking to a small group of people, looking confident, articulate, his eyes shining with a passion I thought I had extinguished forever. He looked up and his gaze met mine. The world seemed to fall away. He excused himself and walked towards me, a slow, tentative smile on his face. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you came." "I invited you," I whispered, my own tears welling up.
Of course I came. Oh, Jordan, look at you. He hugged me then, a real hug, strong and sure. There was no anger between us, no resentment, just the quiet, profound relief of two people who had found their way back to each other across a vast, painful distance. We walked through the gallery together, his arm around my shoulder. He told me the story behind each photograph. Then he stopped in front of the largest piece, the centerpiece of the exhibition. It was a portrait, a close-up of my hands, my old wrinkled hands, holding that single faded photograph of him as a little boy on his father's shoulders, the one I had been holding that day in the attic when my world fell apart. The contrast was devastating and beautiful. The hope of the old photo held in the hands of experience, of pain, of love. The title on the placard beside it simply read, "The Cage." I stared at it, my heart aching with 1,000 emotions. He understood. He truly, finally understood. "I had to be free, Mom," he said softly, standing beside me. "And you had to be free too." "I know, baby. I know now. I love you," he said, his eyes meeting mine, full of a new, mature respect. "Not because you protected me, but because you were brave enough to let me go." "I love you too, Jordan," I replied, my tears finally falling freely, not in sorrow, but in gratitude. In that moment, standing in a gallery in New York City, surrounded by the beautiful, painful, triumphant art my son had created, I knew our story had found its true resolution. It wasn't about forgetting the past or erasing the pain. It was about understanding it, learning from it, and building something new and more honest from the wreckage. My greatest mistake had in the end led to our greatest healing.
The months after Jordan's exhibition in New York felt like the first true spring after a long, brutal winter. The reconciliation wasn't a magic wand. The scars of the past were still there, a quiet reminder of the pain we had both endured and inflicted. But the foundation of our relationship had been rebuilt, this time not with the smothering mortar of my fear, but with the strong, flexible materials of mutual respect and honest communication. I didn't move back to my old life. I couldn't. That woman, Jordan's mother, who lived in that quiet suburban house, no longer existed. My journey of self-discovery hadn't ended in that New York gallery. It had only just been affirmed. I continued to travel for a while, sometimes with Samuel, my kind geologist from Santa Fe, sometimes on my own. I sent Jordan postcards from everywhere, from the bustling markets of Morocco, the serene landscapes of the Scottish Highlands, the vibrant streets of Buenos Aires. And he would email me back with photos of his own journey, his exploration of the cityscapes and the human faces of New York. We were sharing our lives, not managing them. Samuel and I eventually decided to make a home together in the warm, artistic light of Santa Fe. Our life was quiet, but it was a rich quiet, filled with the comfortable silence of two people who understood each other. We had our separate passions, his geology and hiking, my pottery and painting, and our shared ones, a love for jazz, a good bottle of wine, and long conversations on our porch, watching the desert sky shift through its evening palette of impossible colors. For the first time in my life, I was in a partnership of equals, a relationship where my identity was not mother or caregiver, but simply Diane. Jordan thrived. His photography career took off in ways none of us could have predicted. His work, so full of raw emotion and a stark, honest beauty, resonated with people. He had another exhibition, then another. He was featured in magazines. He was becoming the artist I had always known he could be, the artist I had almost extinguished with my loving, fearful protection. And he and Sarah, the landscape architect, built a wonderful life together, a partnership based on mutual support of each other's dreams. He would call me every Sunday, just as he always had, but the calls were different now. We talked not just about his life, but about mine. He'd ask about my painting, about my travels with Samuel, about the new friends I'd made. He was interested in me, Diane, the person. And I, in turn, learned to listen to his struggles without an immediate, suffocating urge to fix them. I learned to offer support instead of solutions, to trust in his ability to navigate his own life, his own failures, his own successes. The real test, the final healing of that deep old wound, came about 2 years after his exhibition. He called me one afternoon, his voice full of an excitement I hadn't heard in years. "Mom," he said, Sarah and we're having a baby." A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over me so potent it made me dizzy. A grandchild, a new life, a new beginning. "And," he continued, his voice growing softer, more serious, "we want to name her after you, if that's okay. We want her to grow up knowing the story of her grandmother, the woman who was brave enough to let go, the woman who taught her father what it really means to be free." I couldn't speak. I just sat there in my quiet Santa Fe home, the phone pressed to my ear, tears of a profound, cleansing joy streaming down my face. Last Christmas, we all gathered at my and Samuel's home. Jordan, a confident, happy man, Sarah, his wonderful, warm wife, and my granddaughter, little Deanna, a beautiful baby with her father's curious eyes. As I held her in my arms, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, I looked across the room at my son. He met my gaze and smiled, a smile of pure, uncomplicated love and understanding. The ghost of the past was finally, truly laid to rest. My life, which had been so defined by my all-consuming love for my son, had shattered, and in the breaking it had allowed for something new to grow. I had to lose my son in a way to truly find him again. And in losing my old identity as just his mother, I had found myself. I learned that the greatest act of love isn't to build a cage of safety around your children, but to have the courage to open the door and trust that you've given them strong enough wings to fly on their own. My confession, which began with the shame of being told I had ruined a life, ends with the quiet, joyful peace of knowing I had, in the end, helped create two, his and my own.